Hi, I'm Camila Rodriguez, and this is the story of how my brother called me worthless to my face after I pitched him my business idea. Then 2 years later, I bought his failing company and watched him beg on his knees for his job back. No warning. No second chances, just the cold satisfaction of seeing realization dawn in his eyes when he understood who was really in charge now. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The silver nameplate on the mahogany door read, Marcus Rodriguez, Chief Executive Officer. I stood outside that door for 5 full minutes, clutching my leather portfolio like it contained state secrets rather than a business proposal I'd spent 18 months perfecting. My heart wasn't racing from excitement, it was pure, unfiltered anxiety. Family doesn't always mean support, and my older brother had made that abundantly clear throughout our lives. Meridian Technologies occupied the entire 15th floor of a gleaming skyscraper in downtown Seattle. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Elliott Bay, a daily reminder to everyone who worked there of my brother's definition of success. The receptionist, a young woman with perfectly styled hair and a practiced smile, had already announced my arrival. "Mr. Rodriguez will see you now," she said with professional detachment. I smoothed down my charcoal blazer, checked that my blouse was still neatly tucked, and stepped through the doorway into my brother's corner office. Marcus sat behind an imposing glass desk, his attention fixed on his computer screen. He didn't look up when I entered. "You're late," he said flatly, though I knew I was precisely on time. "Good morning to you too, Marcus," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. This meeting had taken 3 cancellations and my mother's intervention to finally happen. He gestured vaguely toward the chair across from him without looking away from his screen. "So Mom says you have some kind of startup idea you want to pitch? Let's get this over with. I have a board meeting in 40 minutes. My relationship with Marcus had always been complicated. 7 years my senior, he'd blazed through college, business school, and into the tech industry with the kind of effortless success that made our parents beam with pride. I'd taken a different path, psychology degree, then social work, then an MBA I earned at night while working full-time. My journey had been slower, more deliberate, and in my family's eyes, less impressive. I opened my portfolio and pulled out the executive summary I'd prepared. "It's called Neuromatch," I began, sliding the document across his desk. "It's a platform that uses psychological principles and AI to create more effective team dynamics in corporate environments." Marcus finally looked up, but his expression remained unimpressed. He didn't touch the document. "I've developed a proprietary algorithm that analyzes communication patterns, conflict resolution styles, and work preferences to help companies build teams that—" "Let me stop you right there," Marcus interrupted, leaning back in his leather chair. "Do you have any idea how many AI startups are flooding the market right now? Everyone thinks they've got the next big thing." "This isn't just another AI platform," I insisted. "The psychological framework is based on validated research, and the preliminary tests show." "Tests with what sample size? With what funding? With what technical expertise?" Each question came like a rapid-fire bullet. "Camila, you've always had these ideas. Remember that social network for neighborhood volunteers in college? Or that app for sustainable shopping?" The dismissiveness in his voice made my stomach tighten. Those projects had been learning experiences, stepping stones that led me to where I was now. They weren't failures, they were iterations. "This is different," I said firmly. "I've spent the last year and a half developing this concept. I've consulted with experts in organizational psychology, data science, and now you want my money," Marcus cut in, his voice hardening. "That's why you're here, right? To get your big brother to bankroll another one of your fantasies?" "Actually, no," I replied, trying to maintain my composure. "I'm looking for a strategic partnership. Meridian Technologies has the enterprise client base that would benefit from Neuromatch. I thought we could explore ways to integrate my system with your existing HR platforms." For the first time, a flicker of something crossed Marcus's face, not interest, but surprise that I wasn't asking for a handout. He picked up the executive summary and flipped through it carelessly. "Your system," he repeated with thinly veiled mockery. "Camila, let's be real here. You've never built anything substantial in your life. You bounce from one shiny idea to the next without ever seeing anything through. Now suddenly you're an expert in AI and corporate psychology?" His words stung, but I held my ground. "I've brought in a technical co-founder who previously worked at Microsoft. The back-end architecture is solid, and we've already developed a functioning prototype that—" "A prototype?" Marcus laughed, and it wasn't a kind sound. "So you and what, some washed-up coder have put together a demo, and now you think you can partner with a company that handles data security for Fortune 500 clients?" He stood up abruptly and walked to the window, his back to me. Do you have any idea what it takes to build a real company, Camila? The sleepless nights, the constant pressure, the responsibility of having employees who depend on you to make payroll every month? He turned back to face me. Of course you don't. You've never had to carry that weight. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I felt heat rising in my cheeks. That's not fair. I've worked hard to get where I am. Where are you, exactly? He gestured around his opulent office. Because from where I'm standing, you're still my little sister coming to me with half-baked dreams, expecting me to make them come true. I took a deep breath. I'm not expecting anything. I thought, as family, you might at least give me honest feedback on the concept. Marcus returned to his desk and leaned forward, resting his weight on his knuckles. You want honest feedback? Fine. This idea, like all your others, is worthless. And frankly, your business acumen is worthless too. You don't have what it takes to succeed in this industry, and you never will. The word hung in the air between us. Worthless. It echoed in my head, bouncing off every insecurity I'd ever felt, every doubt I'd ever harbored. The sooner you accept that and find a nice, stable job that matches your capabilities, the better. He continued, seemingly oblivious to the impact of his words. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to prepare for my board meeting. Something that actually matters. I sat frozen in my chair, my carefully prepared pitch in ruins, my confidence shattered. My own brother had just called me worthless to my face. And he didn't even seem to realize how cruel he'd been. With mechanical movements, I gathered my materials and stood up. I wanted to say something cutting, something that would make him feel even a fraction of the pain I was feeling, but no words came. Marcus had already returned his attention to his computer screen, dismissing me from his thoughts as easily as he'd dismissed my business. Thanks for your time, I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't respond. The walk from his office to the elevator felt like a march of shame. Every employee I passed seemed to see right through me, as if the word worthless had been stamped on my forehead in bright red letters. When the elevator doors finally closed, I let out a shaky breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The pristine reflection in the mirrored wall showed a woman who looked collected on the outside. But inside, I was crumbling. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. How did it go with Marcus? Did he love your idea? I didn't respond. How could I tell her that her perfect son had just crushed her disappointing daughter under his heel like an annoying insect? Outside the building, Seattle's perpetual drizzle matched my mood perfectly. I walked 6 blocks in the rain before I even thought about finding shelter, letting the cold droplets mix with the tears that had finally escaped. In a small coffee shop on Pike Street, I ordered a latte I didn't want and sat in the corner, staring at my soggy portfolio. The pages inside, the market analysis, the financial projections, the technical specifications, suddenly seemed naive, childish even. Was Marcus right? Was I just a dreamer who couldn't execute? Was Neuromatch just another in a string of ideas destined to go nowhere? My phone buzzed again. This time it was Eliza, my technical co-founder. How did the big meeting go? Did Big Bro Marcus see the light? Eliza had been skeptical about approaching my brother from the start. Family and business rarely mix well, she'd warned. But I'd insisted. Marcus had connections we needed, and I'd foolishly believed that blood might count for something. I typed back, meeting cancelled. Marcus had an emergency. We'll reschedule. I couldn't bear to tell her the truth. Not yet. Not while the wound was still so fresh. That night, I sat on my apartment balcony overlooking Lake Union, nursing a glass of red wine. The twinkling lights of the city reflected in the dark water, creating an illusion of stars below matching the ones above. It should have been beautiful. But all I could think about was Marcus's voice saying that word. Worthless. It wasn't the first time I'd felt the sting of my brother's judgment. Growing up, Marcus had been the golden child, brilliant, driven, confident. I was the sensitive one, the dreamer, the one who got distracted by ideas and possibilities. Our parents had never directly compared us, but they didn't need to. The contrast was obvious in their proud smiles when Marcus brought home another academic award, versus their concerned expressions when I talked about changing my major for the 3rd time. But this was different. This wasn't sibling rivalry or family dynamics. This was professional cruelty. Marcus hadn't just rejected my idea, he'd rejected me, my potential, my worth as a person and as a business professional. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice memo app. The red record button glowed in the darkness like an accusation. Today, my brother called me worthless, I said into the phone, my voice steadier than I expected. And I have 2 choices now. I can believe him and give up, or I can use his words as fuel to prove him wrong. I took another sip of wine, feeling something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, but alongside it, something new was growing. Determination. Resolve. Maybe even a touch of anger. Starting tomorrow, every decision I make, every action I take, will be with one goal in mind: building Neuromatch into something so successful that even Marcus can't call it worthless. I stopped the recording and stared at it for a long moment. Before saving it. This wasn't just a pep talk, it was a promise to myself. The next morning, I called Eliza and told her the truth about the meeting with Marcus. Her reaction was predictably explosive. "What an absolute jerk," she fumed. "Who talks to their sister like that? I should hack into his calendar and schedule him for colonoscopies at every hospital in Seattle." Despite everything, I laughed. Tempting, but illegal. Besides, we have more important things to focus on. Like what? Finding another strategic partner? "No," I said, feeling a strange calm settle over me. Like proving him wrong. Over the next few weeks, I channeled every ounce of hurt and anger into work. Eliza and I refined our prototype, focusing on the interface and user experience. We reached out to contacts from my MBA program, securing meetings with HR directors at mid-sized companies. We applied to 3 startup accelerators, crafting applications that addressed every potential weakness before it could be pointed out. I stopped checking Marcus's social media feeds, where he regularly posted photos from industry events and boasted about Meridian's growing client list. I muted my mother's texts when she asked why I hadn't returned Marcus's calls that never actually came. Instead, I focused on what I could control: my idea, my work, my determination. 6 weeks after the disastrous meeting, we received an email from Tech Forward, one of the most prestigious accelerators in the Pacific Northwest. They wanted us to pitch in person. The day of our Tech Forward pitch, Eliza and I arrived an hour early, reviewing our slides one last time in the lobby of their downtown office. My hands weren't shaking anymore when I talked about Neuromatch. My voice didn't waver when I outlined our go-to-market strategy. Something had changed within me, a hardening, perhaps, but also a clarifying. "You ready for this?" Eliza asked as we waited to be called in. "More than ready," I replied, and I meant it. Our pitch was scheduled for 20 minutes. We ended up staying for nearly an hour, fielding questions from the accelerator's partners, diving deep into our methodology, our market differentiation, our growth strategy. When we finally emerged, both of us knew we'd done well. 3 days later, the call came: we'd been accepted into Tech Forward's 6-month program. Along with mentorship and office space, we'd receive $150,000 in seed funding. It wasn't a fortune, but it was validation. It was a start. I wanted to call Marcus, to rub it in his face, to say, "See? Someone believes in me." But I resisted the urge. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about me and what I was building. The accelerator program was as grueling as it was rewarding. 18-hour days became the norm. We pivoted our business model twice based on mentor feedback. We scrapped features we'd loved but that users found confusing. We built, tested, failed, learned, and built again. 3 months in, we landed our first paying client, a regional healthcare provider looking to improve communication between their administrative and medical staff. The contract wasn't huge, but seeing that first deposit in our company account felt like magic. "We should celebrate," Eliza insisted, showing up at our shared workspace with a bottle of champagne. As we toasted our small victory, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother: "Dinner at our house this Sunday. Marcus will be there. He has big news." I stared at the message, feeling a familiar knot form in my stomach. I hadn't seen Marcus since that day in his office. I'd skipped family gatherings, made excuses, avoided situations where our paths might cross. But I couldn't keep doing that forever. "You okay?" Eliza asked, noticing my expression. "Family stuff," I replied, putting my phone away. "Nothing that can't wait until tomorrow. Tonight is about celebrating Neuromatch." But as the evening wore on, my thoughts kept returning to the upcoming family dinner. What was Marcus's big news? A promotion? A merger? An engagement to the corporate lawyer he'd been dating? And more importantly, was I strong enough to face him now? Sunday arrived with an unseasonable burst of sunshine. I drove to my parents' house in Bellevue, a sprawling Tudor-style home that had always felt more like a showpiece than a place of comfort. My mother answered the door with her usual enthusiasm, pulling me into a hug that smelled of expensive perfume and hairspray. "Camila. Finally. It's been ages since we've seen you. Come in, come in. Marcus is already here." Of course he was. Marcus was always perfectly punctual, another way in which he excelled and I supposedly fell short. I found him in the living room, chatting with my father about stock options and tax implications. He looked up when I entered, his expression unreadable. "Camila," he said with a nod. "Not a hello, not a how are you, just my name is an acknowledgement of my existence." "Marcus," I replied, matching his tone. My father, oblivious to the tension, launched into questions about my little project, as he called it. I gave vague answers, unwilling to expose Neuromatch to more family scrutiny. Dinner was served precisely at 6, as it always had been in our household. My mother had prepared Marcus's favorite meal, prime rib with Yorkshire pudding and asparagus. The conversation flowed around me, largely centered on Marcus and his accomplishments. "So," my mother said, beaming at her son, "tell Camila your news." Marcus straightened in his chair, a smile spreading across his face. "Meridian just secured Series C funding. $20 million. We're expanding into the European market next quarter." My parents erupted in congratulations. My father raised his wine glass in a toast. "To Marcus and Meridian Technologies. Always reaching new heights." I lifted my glass mechanically, took a small sip, and set it down. "Congratulations," I said, the word feeling like sand in my mouth. Marcus nodded, accepting my acknowledgement as his due. Then, surprisingly, he turned the conversation toward me. "And how about you, Camila? Still working on that, what was it called? Neuro something?" The casual dismissal in his tone made it clear he remembered exactly what it was called. He just couldn't be bothered to say it correctly. "Neuromatch." I corrected. "Yes, we're making progress. We were accepted into Tech Forward's accelerator program." My mother's eyebrows shot up. "The one that's so hard to get into? That's wonderful, honey." Marcus's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Tech Forward? Interesting choice. They tend to focus on social impact startups, don't they? Not exactly where the serious money is." And there it was, the undermining, the subtle dismissal, the implication that my success wasn't real success because it didn't mirror his definition of it. 3 months ago, I would have shrunk under his assessment. I would have doubted myself, questioned my path, felt that familiar ache of inadequacy. But something had changed. I wasn't that person anymore. "Actually," I said, cutting into my prime rib with deliberate precision, Tech Forward has an impressive track record. 3 of their last cohort's companies have been acquired for 8-figure sums. And their mentor network includes CTOs from Amazon and Microsoft. My father looked impressed. "Is that right? Well, that sounds promising, doesn't it, Marcus?" Marcus shrugged. "Sure, if you're looking to be acquired. Some of us prefer to build something lasting, something that changes the industry." He turned to me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "But it's great that you're getting some traction, Camila. Everyone needs to start somewhere." The condescension was so thick I could have cut it with my dinner knife. But instead of feeling wounded, I felt something unexpected: pity. Marcus was so invested in being superior, in maintaining his position at the top of our family hierarchy, that he couldn't simply be happy for me. "You're right, Marcus," I said calmly. "Everyone does need to start somewhere. And sometimes, the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most remarkable endings." His eyes narrowed slightly, as if trying to detect a hidden meaning in my words. Finding none, he turned back to my father and resumed their discussion about tax strategies for his new windfall. I finished my dinner in relative silence, observing my family dynamics with new eyes. The way my mother deferred to Marcus's opinions. The way my father's questions to me were surface level, while his engagement with Marcus ran deep. The way I had, for so long, accepted my place as the lesser sibling. Not anymore. As I drove home that night, I felt lighter somehow. Seeing Marcus hadn't been as devastating as I'd feared. In fact, it had been clarifying. His need to diminish. My achievements said more about him than it did about me. I pulled into my apartment building's garage and sat in my car for a moment, replaying the evening in my mind. Then I took out my phone and opened the voice memo app again. Today I saw Marcus for the first time since he called me worthless. I spoke into the recorder. And I realized something important. His opinion of me doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what I'm building, who I'm becoming, and the impact Neuromatch will have. His approval is irrelevant to my success. I saved the recording and added it to a growing collection. These voice memos had become a kind of therapy for me, a way to process my thoughts and document my journey. Little did I know then how significant that journey would become, or how dramatically the tables would turn in the months ahead. All I knew was that something fundamental had shifted inside me that night. I was no longer defining myself in relation to Marcus. I was defining myself on my own terms. And that, as it turned out, would make all the difference. The weeks after that awkward family dinner became a blur of pitch meetings, late nights coding with Eliza, and increasingly promising user feedback. We'd refined our platform to focus specifically on identifying team communication breakdowns before they affected productivity. Companies were starting to notice. Our client list grew from 1 to 3, then to 7. Small victories, but each one felt monumental. I was reviewing our latest user metrics when Eliza burst into our shared workspace, coffee sloshing dangerously close to the rim of her mug. "Did you see it?" she demanded, thrusting her phone toward me. I took it from her hand and squinted at the screen. It was a tech industry newsletter with the headline, "Meridian Technologies Faces Integration Troubles After European Expansion." The article detailed how Marcus's company was struggling to implement their security systems with European data protection frameworks. Several high-profile clients had delayed their contracts, and the company's stock had dropped 12%. In response, "Not our problem," I said, handing the phone back to Eliza. But a small, petty part of me felt a flicker of satisfaction. The golden boy was facing challenges. Maybe he wasn't infallible after all. "There's more," Eliza said, scrolling down. "They've had a massive talent exodus. 3 senior developers quit last month. Rumor has it their workplace culture is toxic." I remembered Marcus's words about carrying the weight of responsibility for employees. Apparently, his leadership style wasn't inspiring the loyalty he thought it deserved. "Interesting," I said, trying to sound neutral. "But we should focus on our own company, not someone else's problems." Eliza gave me a knowing look. "Sure, but admit it, it feels a little good to see Mr. Perfect hitting some turbulence." I didn't admit it out loud, but she wasn't wrong. That evening, my mother called. "Have you spoken to your brother recently?" she asked without preamble. "No," I replied truthfully. "Why would I?" "He's going through a difficult time with the company," she said, her voice tinged with worry. "I thought maybe you could reach out, offer some support. You're in the same industry, after all." The irony of her suggestion wasn't lost on me. When I was struggling, when Marcus had crushed my confidence with a single word, there had been no family intervention on my behalf. But now that the golden child was facing difficulties, I was expected to offer comfort and wisdom. "I'm sure Marcus doesn't need advice from someone he considers worthless," I said before I could stop myself. There was a pause on the line. "What are you talking about?" I realized my mother had no idea what had transpired between us. Marcus had never told her how cruelly he dismissed me and my business. "Nothing," I said quickly. "Just something," Marcus said once. "Look, I'm really busy with Neuromatch right now. We're in a critical growth phase. But family should come first, Camila. Especially when someone is struggling." I closed my eyes, counted to 3. "I'll think about it," I promised, knowing I had no intention of reaching out to Marcus. The next morning, Tech Forward hosted a showcase event for investors. Eliza and I had prepared extensively, refining our pitch deck, rehearsing our demonstration, anticipating every possible question. This was our chance to secure additional funding beyond the accelerator's initial investment. The venue was packed with venture capitalists, angel investors, and tech industry veterans. I scanned the crowd as we set up our presentation station, my heart nearly stopping when I spotted a familiar figure near the entrance. Marcus. He was speaking with one of the accelerator's partners, his expression serious, nodding occasionally. He looked different somehow, slightly less polished, with subtle shadows under his eyes that makeup couldn't quite conceal. "Your brother's here," Eliza whispered, following my gaze. "Want me to spill coffee on his designer suit?" I shook my head. "Just ignore him. We have more important things to focus on." But as the event got underway, I couldn't help watching him from the corner of my eye. He moved through the room with his usual confidence, shaking hands, exchanging business cards. Was he here looking for talent to poach? For investment opportunities? Or just to keep tabs on the competition? Our presentation slot came midway through the morning. As we took our positions, I saw Marcus slip into the back of our audience section, arms crossed, expression unreadable. For a brief moment, anxiety threatened to overwhelm me. What if he asked a pointed question designed to undermine us? What if his presence alone made me stumble over my words? But then I remembered the voice memos on my phone, the promises I'd made to myself. His opinion didn't matter anymore. What mattered was what we'd built. I launched into our pitch with a confidence that surprised even me. Neuromatch isn't just another HR tool. It's a revolution in team dynamics that identifies communication patterns and potential conflicts before they impact productivity. The demonstration went flawlessly. Eliza showcased our interface while I explained the psychological framework behind our algorithm. When we opened the floor for questions, investors engaged thoughtfully with our concept. No one asked about our small client base or limited funding, they were focused on the potential of what we'd created. Throughout it all, Marcus remained silent in the back, his expression giving nothing away. After our presentation, investors crowded around our station, exchanging cards, requesting follow-up meetings. I was deep in conversation with a partner from Cascade Ventures when I felt a presence at my shoulder. "Impressive work," Marcus said, his voice startling me despite my awareness that he might approach. "Your platform has evolved since we last discussed it." The woman from Cascade Ventures looked between us. "You two know each other?" "My brother," I said simply. Her eyebrows rose. "Marcus Rodriguez is your brother?" "Well, tech talent clearly runs in the family." Marcus smiled tightly. "Indeed. Though we have very different approaches to the industry." I excused myself from the conversation as soon as politeness allowed, retreating to the refreshment table, where Eliza was already loading up a plate with miniature pastries. "What did he want?" she asked around a mouthful of croissant. "Just making his presence known," I replied. Classic Marcus behavior. But something about the encounter left me unsettled. There had been none of his usual condescension, none of the subtle digs at my capabilities or choices. Just that acknowledgement that our work was impressive. I didn't have time to dwell on it. The showcase resulted in 4 serious investment inquiries, including an offer from Cascade Ventures for $500,000 in exchange for a 15% equity stake. Within a week, we had term sheets to review and decisions to make about our company's future. "We should take the Cascade offer," Eliza argued as we sat in our workspace after hours, surrounded by empty takeout containers. "Their portfolio is aligned with our vision, and they have the connections we need." I nodded, but my mind kept returning to Marcus's appearance at the showcase. "Did you think it was strange that my brother showed up? He's never shown any genuine interest in what we're doing before." Eliza shrugged. "Maybe he's realized your actual competition now. Or maybe Meridian is in worse shape than the news is reporting, and he's scouting for new opportunities." "Maybe," I agreed, though neither explanation felt quite right. My phone buzzed with a text. "Unknown number, we should talk. Dinner tomorrow?" "Marcus," I stared at the message, a dozen conflicting emotions washing over me. Part of me wanted to ignore it completely. Another part was curious about what he could possibly want to discuss. And a small, stubborn part still yearned for the approval I'd been seeking from him my entire life. "Who's that?" Eliza asked, noticing my expression. "Marcus," I replied. "He wants to have dinner tomorrow. Are you going to go?" I hesitated, then typed a response, "I'm busy with investor meetings all week." It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. His reply came almost immediately, "I understand. When you have time, I'd like to discuss a potential collaboration between Meridian and Neuromatch." I nearly dropped my phone. "Collaboration? What kind of game is he playing now?" "What's wrong?" Eliza asked, alarmed by my tone. I showed her the message. She read it twice, her brow furrowing. "That's unexpected." "It's suspicious is what it is," I replied. "After everything he said about Neuromatch being worthless, now he wants to collaborate? Something doesn't add up. Maybe Meridian really is in trouble, and he sees your platform as a potential solution to their problems." The thought was both gratifying and disturbing. Could Marcus truly have changed his mind about my capabilities? Or was this some kind of trap? I didn't respond to his message that night. Instead, I focused on preparing for our meeting with Cascade Ventures the next day. But Marcus's unexpected overture lingered in the back of my mind like an unsolved puzzle. The Cascade meeting went even better than anticipated. They increased their offer to $750,000 for the same equity percentage, with the added promise of introductions to their entire network of enterprise clients. We left their offices with a preliminary agreement and a champagne buzz from the celebratory toast they'd insisted on. "We're doing it," Eliza said as we walked back to our office. "We're actually building something real here." I nodded, a wave of validation washing over me. "Yes, we are." My phone buzzed again. "Marcus, I see Cascade is investing in Neuromatch. Congratulations. My offer to discuss collaboration still stands." How did he know about Cascade already? The deal wasn't public information yet. I showed Eliza the message. "He's keeping tabs on us somehow." "That's a little creepy," she agreed. "But also a sign that we're doing something right. You don't spy on competitors you don't see as threats." That evening, I recorded another voice memo. "Today we secured our first major investment round. Neuromatch is officially on the map. And Marcus is suddenly interested in collaboration. I don't trust his motives, but there's a certain satisfaction in knowing he's now seeking me out after dismissing me so completely. Whatever game he's playing, I won't let it distract me from our vision. Neuromatch is just getting started." Over the next 2 months, Neuromatch grew rapidly. We moved from the accelerator's shared space to our own small office. We hired 2 additional developers and a marketing specialist. Our client list expanded to include 2 Fortune 500 companies who were implementing our platform across their HR departments. Meanwhile, Meridian's troubles continued to make headlines. Their European expansion had stalled completely. A class action lawsuit had been filed by shareholders alleging mismanagement. And Marcus's texts became increasingly frequent, each one reiterating his interest in a potential partnership. I continued to deflect, citing our busy schedule and rapid growth phase. The truth was, I wasn't ready to face him across a table again. The memory of that word, worthless, still stung, even amid our success. Until one evening when my father called, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "Camila, I think you should talk to your brother," he said without preamble. "Dad, Meridian is in serious trouble," he interrupted. "Worse than what's being reported. Marcus won't admit it to me directly, but I can read between the lines. His board is considering replacing him as CEO." The news hit me like a physical blow. For all our complicated history, the thought of Marcus losing the company he'd built from the ground up was unexpectedly painful. "What happened?" I asked. "Multiple factors," my father sighed. "The European expansion was too aggressive. Their core security platform had significant vulnerabilities that weren't addressed. And apparently, there's been a mass exodus of talent. Due to," he hesitated, leadership issues. Leadership issues. A polite way of saying Marcus's management style had driven away his best people. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, meaning it. "But I'm not sure what you expect me to do about it." "Just talk to him," my father urged. "He respects you more than you realize. Maybe there's a way Neuromatch could help Meridian address their team culture problems." I nearly laughed at the irony. The company I'd built after being called worthless might now be the solution to my brother's problems. "I'll think about it," I promised, the same non-committal response I'd given my mother weeks earlier. But this time, I actually meant it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, weighing my options. Agreeing to meet with Marcus would mean opening myself up to potential manipulation or disappointment. But refusing meant possibly missing an opportunity to prove definitively that my idea, my company, my vision had value, even to the person who had dismissed it most completely. By morning, I'd made my decision. I texted Marcus, "Dinner tomorrow. 7 p.m. Canlis. We can discuss potential synergies between our companies." His response was immediate, "I'll be there." "Thank you, Camila." Canlis was one of Seattle's most exclusive restaurants, with panoramic views of Lake Union and a price point that made even successful tech executives check the bill twice. I chose it deliberately. I wanted Marcus to meet me on elevated ground, in a setting that symbolized how far I'd come since that humiliating meeting in his office. I arrived early, dressed in a tailored burgundy suit that projected confidence without trying too hard. The maitre d' seated me at a window table I'd specifically requested when making the reservation. I ordered a glass of champagne while I waited, not to calm my nerves, but to celebrate how differently I felt walking into this meeting compared to our last one. Marcus arrived precisely at 7, punctual as always. He looked thinner than I remembered, the sharp angles of his face more pronounced. His custom suit hung slightly looser on his frame. The confident swagger I'd always associated with him seemed diminished somehow. "Camila," he said, taking the seat across from me. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "Of course," I replied with practiced neutralness. "You mentioned a potential collaboration between our companies. I'm curious to hear what you have in mind." He ordered a scotch, neat, and took a long sip before responding. "Neuromatch has developed an impressive platform for analyzing team dynamics and improving workplace communication. Meridian could benefit from implementing such a system internally." I raised an eyebrow. "Are you saying you want to become a client?" "Potentially," he nodded. "We've had some challenges with retention and team cohesion recently." Read the reports," I said, my tone deliberately neutral. Marcus grimaced. "The public reports only scratch the surface. The reality is more complicated." "It usually is." Our appetizers arrived, giving him a moment to gather his thoughts. I noticed his hands had a slight tremor as he picked up his fork, something I'd never seen in my perpetually composed brother. "The truth is," he continued after the server had departed, "Meridian is facing a critical juncture. Our board is concerned about the direction of the company. They've suggested bringing in outside consultants to evaluate our internal culture and team structure." "And you thought of Neuromatch," I supplied. He nodded. "Your platform offers something different from traditional consultants. It's data-driven, objective, focused on measurable improvements rather than subjective assessments." It was exactly the value proposition we highlighted in our marketing materials. Marcus had clearly done his homework. Why now? I asked, the question that had been bothering me since his first text. You made your opinion of Neuromatch quite clear during our last meeting. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. Circumstances change. People change. I've had to reevaluate many of my assumptions recently. Including your assumption that my business idea was worthless? The word hung between us like a live wire. Marcus flinched visibly. I behaved abominably that day, he admitted, his voice low. I was arrogant, dismissive, and cruel. There's no excuse for it. I hadn't expected an admission, let alone an apology. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. The thing is, Camila, he continued, filling the silence, I was threatened. By you. Threatened? I repeated, incredulous. You were the successful CEO with the corner office and the multi-million-dollar company. How could you possibly feel threatened by me? Because you've always had the one thing I lack, vision, he said simply. You see possibilities where others see problems. You connect dots no one else notices. I built Meridian on solid execution of existing concepts. You create entirely new concepts. I stared at him, trying to process this revelation. All my life, I'd felt inadequate compared to Marcus, his focus, his drive, his apparent certainty about his path. To hear that he'd harbored his own insecurities about my abilities was disorienting. That doesn't excuse how you treated me, I said finally. No, he agreed. It doesn't. And I'm not asking for forgiveness, just an opportunity to do business together now, professionally. Neuromatch could help save Meridian, and a high-profile client like Meridian could help establish Neuromatch in the enterprise market. It was a reasonable proposition. A win-win scenario, on paper at least. But something still felt off. What exactly is happening at Meridian? I asked. Beyond what's in the press releases and financial reports. Marcus hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. The board has given me 90 days to turn things around. If key metrics don't improve by then, they'll replace me as CEO. The admission clearly cost him. His jaw tightened, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond my shoulder. I see, I said quietly. And you think implementing Neuromatch will convince them you're addressing the internal issues? I think Neuromatch might actually solve the internal issues, he corrected. Which would improve performance and retention, which would in turn satisfy the board. Our main courses arrived. I used the interruption to consider his proposal and my own feelings about it. Part of me wanted to help him, he was still my brother, despite everything. Another part warned that entangling our businesses might lead to complications neither of us needed. And a small, vindictive part whispered that there was poetic justice in watching him struggle after he'd been so cruel to me. I pushed that last voice aside. Success built on someone else's failure wasn't the kind of success I wanted. I'll need to discuss this with my team, I said finally. And if we move forward, it would be a standard client relationship with our usual terms and implementation process. No special treatment. Relief washed across his face. Of course. I wouldn't expect anything else. And Marcus, I added, meeting his gaze directly, this is business, not family. If we do this, I expect to be treated with the same respect you'd show any other company CEO. He nodded solemnly. Absolutely. As we finished our meal, the conversation shifted to more neutral territory, industry trends, mutual acquaintances, the changing tech landscape in Seattle. By the time we parted ways outside the restaurant, something had shifted between us. Not forgiveness, exactly, but perhaps the beginning of a new understanding. Walking to my car, I realized I felt neither triumph nor anxiety about the prospect of working with Marcus. Just a calm certainty that whatever happened next, I would handle it on my own terms. The woman who had left his office feeling worthless less than a year ago was gone. In her place stood someone who knew her value, who had built something meaningful, and who now held the power to extend a helping hand, or not, based solely on her own business judgment. That night, I recorded what would become one of my final voice memos in this chapter of my journey. Today, Marcus asked for my help. Not as his little sister, but as the CEO of a company that might save his. Whatever I decide, I'm making the choice from a position of strength, not weakness. And that feels like victory, regardless of what comes next. What came next, however, would surpass even my wildest expectations. The morning after my dinner with Marcus, I called an emergency meeting with Eliza and our small leadership team. We gathered in our conference room, really just a corner of our office with a salvaged wooden table and mismatched chairs, but it was ours. Meridian Technologies wants to become a client, I announced, watching their reactions carefully. Eliza's eyebrows shot up. Your brother's company? The same brother who said our entire concept was worthless? The very same, I confirmed. Apparently, Meridian is facing significant internal challenges. Their board has given Marcus 90 days to turn things around, or he's out as CEO. Daniel, our lead developer, whistled low. That's a tight timeline for organizational change. Maya, our recently hired marketing director, was already typing furiously on her laptop. This could be huge for us. A case study with a company like Meridian, even if they're struggling, would open doors with other enterprise clients. I nodded. That's one perspective. The other is that taking on a client in crisis could stretch our resources thin and potentially tarnish our reputation if we can't deliver results quickly enough. Not to mention the whole family dynamic complication, Eliza added, giving me a pointed look. I'd been transparent with my team about my relationship with Marcus from the beginning. They knew our history, including his dismissal of Neuromatch. I've made it clear this would be a standard business relationship, I said. No special treatment, no family discounts, no accommodations beyond what we'd do for any client. And he agreed to that? Eliza sounded skeptical. He's not in a position to negotiate, I replied simply. We spent the next hour weighing the pros and cons. The potential visibility and case study were significant advantages. The compressed timeline and high stakes were concerning. The personal history added a layer of complexity that couldn't be ignored. What's your gut telling you? Daniel finally asked, looking directly at me. I considered the question carefully. That we can help them. That our platform was designed for exactly this kind of situation. And that the satisfaction of proving Neuromatch's value to the person who called it worthless shouldn't be my primary motivation, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a factor. Maya smiled. Honesty. I like it. I think we should do it, Eliza said, surprising me. She'd been the most skeptical about Marcus from day one. But with conditions. We need complete access to their teams, full transparency about their current issues, and a signed agreement that they'll serve as a reference if the implementation is successful. Agreed, I said. And I want clear metrics for success established up front, so there's no ambiguity about whether we've delivered. By the end of the meeting, we had a strategy. I would meet with Marcus again to outline our conditions and approach. If he agreed, we would begin immediately with a company-wide assessment using our platform. I texted him that afternoon. Neuromatch is prepared to work with Meridian, with specific conditions. Available to discuss tomorrow at our office, 10 a.m. Suggesting he come to our space rather than meeting on his turf was deliberate. I wanted him to see what we'd built, to walk into our world rather than summoning me to his. His reply was prompt, I'll be there. That night, I found myself standing on my apartment balcony again, looking out at the Seattle skyline. The lights of downtown reflected in Lake Union, creating that familiar illusion of stars above and below. But unlike that night months ago, when I'd stood in this same spot feeling shattered by Marcus's cruelty, tonight I felt centered, confident. Whatever happened with Meridian, whether we helped save the company or not, Neuromatch was thriving. We had a product that worked, clients who valued it, and a team committed to our vision. Marcus's opinion, his approval or lack thereof, no longer defined my sense of worth. The realization felt like shedding a weight I'd carried for so long. I'd forgotten it was there. Marcus arrived at our office precisely at 10 the next morning. He looked slightly out of place among our startup decor, IKEA furniture mixed with vintage finds, walls covered in whiteboard paint filled with diagrams and sticky notes, the buzz of a small but energetic team. I met him in the reception area, offering a professional handshake rather than a familial greeting. Welcome to Neuromatch. Thank you for having me, he replied, his eyes taking in our space with genuine curiosity rather than the judgment I'd half expected. I led him to our conference room where Eliza was waiting, along with digital copies of our standard client agreement and a customized proposal for Meridian. Marcus, this is Eliza Chen, my co-founder and CTO, I introduced them. Eliza, Marcus Rodriguez, CEO of Meridian Technologies. They shook hands, Eliza's expression professionally neutral despite knowing all the history between us. Your platform is impressive, Marcus said to her. The psychological framework you've built into the algorithm is unlike anything else on the market. Camila developed the psychological framework, Eliza corrected him. I just helped translate it into code. Marcus glanced at me, something like surprise flickering in his eyes. I didn't realize you were so directly involved in the technical development. There's a lot you don't know about Neuromatch, I replied evenly. Let's talk about how we can help Meridian. For the next hour, we outlined our approach, a company-wide assessment using our platform, followed by targeted interventions based on the results, implemented over a 60-day period. 60 days? Marcus frowned. The board gave me 90, but real results need to be visible within 60. That's our timeline, I said firmly. We won't rush our process or promise unrealistic outcomes. If you want a quick fix, there are Plenty of consultants who will tell you what you want to hear. He looked like he wanted to argue but thought better of it. Understood. We went through our conditions: complete access to all teams, transparent sharing of current issues, commitment to implement our recommendations, and agreement to serve as a reference if certain success metrics were met. These terms are non-negotiable. I concluded. If they don't work for you, we understand. Marcus was silent for a moment, studying the documents before him. Then he looked up, his expression resolute. They work. When can you start? We'll need all employee data by end of day tomorrow. We can begin the initial assessment Monday. You'll have everything you need, he promised. After he left, Eliza turned to me with a half smile. Well, that was surreal. Your brother actually seemed humble. Desperation has that effect, I replied, but there had been something else in his demeanor, a genuine respect that hadn't been there before. The following Monday, our team arrived at Meridian's headquarters to launch the assessment phase. Walking through those same glass doors where I'd once clutched my portfolio nervously, I now carried myself with the confidence of someone leading a critical initiative. The receptionist, not the same one from my previous visit, greeted me by name. Ms. Rodriguez, we've prepared the conference room on the 4th floor for your team. Mr. Rodriguez asked me to let you know he's in a board meeting but will join you as soon as it concludes. Thank you, I replied, signing in and accepting the visitor badges for our team. Eliza nudged me as we waited for the elevator. Ms. Rodriguez, she mimicked. Quite the upgrade from being kept waiting in the lobby. I smiled but kept my focus on the task ahead. Today wasn't about personal vindication, it was about demonstrating Neuromatch's capabilities in a high-stakes environment. The assessment phase was intensive. We interviewed key team members, collected communication data from various departments, and deployed our diagnostic tools across the organization. What emerged was a complex picture of a company in disarray. Technical teams were siloed, with minimal communication between groups working on interconnected systems. Middle management had developed a culture of withholding negative information from leadership. The European expansion had been launched without adequate input from regulatory compliance experts. And at the center of it all was Marcus's leadership style, demanding excellence without providing clear direction, punishing failure without rewarding success, creating an environment where people were afraid to speak up about problems until they became crises. On the 3rd day of our assessment, I found myself alone with Marcus in his office, the same space where he'd once dismissed my business idea so cruelly. The contrast between then and now wasn't lost on either of us. Your team is thorough, he observed, gesturing toward the preliminary findings report I'd just shared. And direct. Sugarcoating won't help Meridian, I replied. And you're paying us for honesty, not comfort. He nodded slowly. The leadership issues identified in the report, they're primarily about me, aren't they? I met his gaze. Steadily. Yes. He didn't flinch from the assessment. I suspected as much. The board has been hinting at similar concerns for months. The good news is that leadership behaviors are modifiable, I said. If you're willing to put in the work. What kind of work? Communication training. Feedback mechanisms. Regular check-ins with teams at all levels. Creating psychological safety so people can flag issues before they become catastrophes. I tapped the report. It's all outlined here. He studied me for a moment, a complex emotion in his eyes. You've really built something remarkable, Camila. I was wrong about you. About Neuromatch. About a lot of things. I know, I said simply. By the end of the 2nd week, we had a comprehensive picture of Meridian's challenges and a structured plan for addressing them. We presented our findings to Marcus and his executive team in their main boardroom, the same room where I'd later confront him with evidence of his failures. But that day hadn't come yet. That day, I was still the consultant, the external expert, brought in to solve a problem. The assessment reveals 3 critical areas for immediate intervention, I explained, standing at the head of the table where Marcus usually presided. He had deliberately taken a seat along the side, symbolically ceding control of the meeting to me. First, communication flow between technical teams needs to be restructured. Second, the feedback culture needs to be reformed to encourage early problem identification. And third, leadership approaches need to be modified to support these changes. Marcus's executive team exchanged glances as I outlined specific recommendations for each area. Some looked skeptical, others relieved that someone was finally naming the issues they'd felt but couldn't articulate. This won't be easy, I concluded. Organizational change never is. But our data suggests these interventions could significantly improve team cohesion, reduce turnover, and ultimately strengthen product quality and customer satisfaction. What's the timeline? Asked the CFO, a sharp-eyed woman who had been studying our reports intently. 8 weeks for full implementation, I replied. But you should see measurable improvements in team communication metrics within the first 3 weeks. And the cost? She pressed. We've provided a detailed breakdown in the proposal, I said. But the real question is, what's the cost of not implementing these changes? The room fell silent. Everyone present knew the answer: Marcus's job. And potentially the company's future. We're proceeding with all recommendations, Marcus said firmly, ending the discussion. Camila and her team have our full cooperation. The implementation phase was even more intensive than the assessment. We practically lived at Meridian for the next month, facilitating workshops, reconfiguring team structures, implementing new communication protocols, and coaching leaders, including Marcus, on more effective approaches. The resistance we encountered wasn't surprising. Change is threatening, especially to those who have mastered the old system. Some middle managers were particularly resistant, having built their careers on controlling information flow. They're undermining the process, Eliza reported after a particularly difficult session with the product management team. Telling their people to go through the motions but not actually change anything substantive. Identify the key resistors, I instructed. We'll need to address them directly or work around them. Marcus proved surprisingly adaptable. He attended every leadership workshop, actively participated in the exercises, and visibly worked to modify his communication style. In group settings, he became more inquisitive and less declarative. In one-on-one interactions, he practiced active listening instead of immediate problem solving. This doesn't come naturally to me, he admitted. During a coaching session. I've always believed leadership means having all the answers. The best leaders know when to have answers and when to ask questions, I replied. Your team has expertise you don't. Your job is to create conditions where they can apply that expertise effectively. By week 4, we began seeing measurable shifts. Communication density between teams increased by 34%. Early problem reporting rose by 28%. Employee pulse survey scores on psychological safety improved by 15%. Small changes, but trending in the right direction. Then came the crisis that would test everything we'd been building. It began with an urgent call from Marcus on a Sunday evening. We've discovered a critical vulnerability in our European security framework. It's not public yet, but it's serious. I need your team in the office first thing tomorrow. The vulnerability was indeed serious, a potential backdoor that could allow unauthorized access to client data. In the old Meridian, this discovery would have triggered a cascade of blame, finger-pointing, and information hoarding. But the company we walked into that Monday morning was already responding differently. The technical teams had self-organized into cross-functional groups addressing different aspects of the problem. Information was flowing freely across previously siloed departments. Leaders were supporting rather than controlling the process. Marcus had set the tone with a company-wide email that embodied everything we'd been teaching: transparency about the issue, clarity on priorities, confidence in the team's capabilities, and personal accountability as the CEO. I found him in the command center that had been established in the main conference room, surrounded by screens displaying real-time data from various systems. This is the test, isn't it? He said quietly as I joined him. Everything you've been trying to build here. I nodded. How's it going? Better than it would have 3 weeks ago, he admitted. No one's hiding information. No one's afraid to speak up about potential solutions. We're actually functioning like a team. Over the next 72 hours, Meridian's transformed culture faced its trial by fire. The vulnerability was isolated, contained, and patched before any breach occurred. Client data remained secure. The potential crisis became instead a powerful demonstration of organizational resilience. When the all-clear finally came, Marcus gathered everyone in the main atrium. Exhausted engineers and analysts who had worked around the clock stood shoulder to shoulder with marketing and sales teams who had prepared communication plans that, thankfully, wouldn't be needed. What just happened wasn't luck, Marcus told them, his voice carrying through the open space. It was the result of the changes we've all been working on. 3 months ago, this same situation would have been a disaster, not because we lacked technical skill, but because we lacked the right communication structures and leadership approaches. He paused, scanning the crowd. I want to thank Neuromatch for helping us build those structures. And I want to thank each of you for embracing this transformation, even when it wasn't easy. The spontaneous applause that followed wasn't just for his words, it was recognition of a genuine shift in the company's culture. Later that week, preliminary results from Meridian's quarterly performance indicators showed surprising improvements. Customer satisfaction scores had increased. Employee retention had stabilized. Even early sales figures for the quarter were trending upward. When Marcus presented these results to his board, along with the detailed case study of how the security vulnerability had been handled, they responded with cautious optimism. The 90-day deadline for demonstrating improvement had been met. His position as CEO was secure, at least for now. He called me that evening from his car. The board meeting went well, he reported. They've approved the full implementation of NeuroMatch across all departments, including our international offices. That's great news, I replied. Eliza will be thrilled. There's more, he continued. They've also approved my recommendation to explore a potential acquisition of NeuroMatch by Meridian. I nearly dropped my phone. Acquisition? That wasn't part of our agreement. It's just an exploration at this stage, he clarified quickly. But the board sees the value NeuroMatch has brought to Meridian. They believe integrating your platform fully into our suite of services could provide significant competitive advantage. Marcus, we're not looking to sell, I said firmly. We're building our own company, our own vision. I understand, he replied. But I'd be remiss as Meridian's CEO not to present the opportunity. The offer would be substantial. How substantial? The question slipped out before I could stop it. He named a figure that momentarily took my breath away, many times what investors had valued NeuroMatch at just months earlier. Think about it, he suggested. That's all I'm asking. We can discuss details when you're ready. After we hung up, I sat in stunned silence in my apartment. An acquisition hadn't been on my radar. NeuroMatch was growing, thriving as an independent entity. We were just beginning to realize our vision. But the figure Marcus had mentioned would set me up for life. Would provide resources to pursue other ideas, other innovations. Would represent undeniable validation of what we'd built. I called Eliza and shared the conversation. Her reaction was more measured than I'd expected. We should at least hear them out, she said. Getting acquired by a company like Meridian could help scale NeuroMatch's impact far beyond what we could achieve independently. But we'd lose control, I argued. Our vision would become subordinate to Meridian's priorities. Not necessarily, she countered. With the right terms, we could maintain significant autonomy within the larger organization. We agreed to sleep on it before making any decisions. But that night, sleep eluded me. I kept returning to that moment in Marcus's office over a year ago, when he'd called my idea, and by extension, me, worthless. Now he was prepared to pay millions for that same idea. The irony wasn't lost on me. But was vindication worth giving up independence? As dawn broke over Seattle, I made my decision. I would hear Meridian's offer, not because I was inclined to accept it, but because understanding my company's value in the marketplace was essential information for any CEO. What I didn't realize then was that this decision would set in motion events that would fundamentally alter my relationship with Marcus, the trajectory of both our companies, and ultimately, bring us to that moment when he would kneel before me, begging for his professional life. But that moment was still to come. First, there would be negotiations, revelations, and one final, devastating betrayal. The acquisition talks began formally the following week. Meridian sent over a preliminary term sheet outlining their offer, $30 million for complete ownership of NeuroMatch, with employment contracts for me, Eliza, and our key team members. The number was staggering for a company at our stage, well above market valuation. They really want us, Eliza marveled as we reviewed the document in our office after hours. This is at least double what comparable acquisitions have gone for recently. I nodded, still processing the implications. The question is why? What does Marcus see in NeuroMatch that justifies this premium? Our technology works, Eliza said simply. They've experienced the results firsthand. And it's complementary to their existing services without overlapping. Those were the rational business reasons, and they were valid. But something else nagged at me, something more personal, more complex. I want to bring in an independent advisor before we respond, I decided. Someone who can evaluate this offer objectively, without the emotional history I have with Meridian. We engaged Alexandra Vega, a respected tech industry consultant with experience in M&A transactions. She spent a week reviewing our company, Meridian's offer, and the competitive landscape before delivering her assessment. The offer is generous, she acknowledged, sitting across from us in our conference room. Above market, as you already know. But there are concerns. What kind of concerns? I asked. Integration challenges, for one. Meridian's corporate culture, despite your recent work with them, remains quite different from NeuroMatch's. There's a risk your team and technology could be absorbed and then diluted or sidelined. Eliza frowned. That happens in a lot of acquisitions. It does, Alexandra agreed. But there's something else that strikes me as unusual. The timing. What about it? I prompted. Meridian is still in recovery mode. Companies in their position typically focus on stabilization before making major acquisitions. This move feels premature from a strategic standpoint. I considered her words carefully. Unless there's another motivation beyond the strategic value of Neuromatch. Alexandra nodded. Exactly. Which brings me to my next point. I did some digging into Meridian's financials, the public information, at least. There are inconsistencies that concern me. She pulled up a presentation on her tablet and walked us through a series of charts showing Meridian's reported growth against industry benchmarks. See this spike in European revenue last quarter? It doesn't align with their reported client acquisition rate or their known challenges in that market. Could be a reporting anomaly, Eliza suggested. Could be, Alexandra agreed. Or it could be something else. She looked directly at me. My advice? Proceed with caution. Request more detailed financial disclosures as part of your due diligence. And consider a structure that protects Neuromatch's autonomy and links payments to performance milestones rather than a complete upfront acquisition. After she left, Eliza and I sat in silence for a moment, absorbing her insights. What are you thinking? Eliza finally asked. That there's more to this offer than Marcus is saying, I replied slowly. And that we need to understand what it is before making any decisions. We drafted a response to Meridian's term sheet, expressing interest but requesting additional information, 3 years of detailed financial statements, client retention data, and technical architecture documentation to assess integration feasibility. We also proposed an alternative structure, a strategic partnership with a potential path to acquisition after a 2-year collaboration period. Marcus called me directly after receiving our counterproposal. This isn't what I expected, he said. His tone carefully neutral. I thought you'd be more receptive to a clean acquisition. We're being appropriately cautious, I replied. Neuromatch is our creation, our vision. We won't hand it over without comprehensive due diligence. There was a pause on the line. The financial disclosures you're requesting. Some of that information is sensitive. The board is concerned about sharing it with a company that might remain a competitor. Then we sign more stringent NDAs, I countered. But we need to understand Meridian's financial health before considering an acquisition. I'll take it back to the board, he said finally. But I should warn you, they were excited about moving quickly. Delays might cool their enthusiasm. We're not willing to rush this decision, I said firmly. Quality due diligence takes time. After we hung up, I sat at my desk, turning our conversation over in my mind. Marcus's reluctance to share financial information reinforced Alexandra's concerns. What was Meridian hiding? The next day, I received an unexpected call from Jacob Reinhardt, one of Meridian's board members. I'd met him briefly during our work with the company but hadn't spoken with him directly. Ms. Rodriguez, he began formally, I understand you have some reservations about the acquisition offer. We have questions that need answers before we can properly evaluate it, I clarified. Understandable, he replied. I was wondering if we might meet in person to discuss those concerns. Sometimes these matters are better handled face-to-face than through formal documents. I agreed to meet him for lunch the following day at a discreet restaurant in Bellevue, away from the tech industry's usual haunts. Jacob Reinhardt was in his 60s, with silver hair and the polished manner of someone who'd navigated corporate boardrooms for decades. He ordered a scotch before noon and got straight to the point. Your brother is a talented entrepreneur, he said after we'd exchanged pleasantries. He built Meridian from nothing into a significant player in the security space. But the past year has revealed limitations in his leadership approach. I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. The board believes in Meridian's potential. He went on. But we've lost confidence in Marcus's ability to realize that potential independently. Yet you voted to retain him as CEO after our intervention, I pointed out. Reinhardt nodded. A temporary measure. Your work with the company was impressive, it bought Marcus time. But the underlying concerns remain. And how does acquiring Neuromatch address those concerns? He studied me for a moment before answering. We see 2 possibilities. 1. Your technology becomes fully integrated into Meridian, strengthening our service offerings and corporate culture from within. 2. You become integrated into Meridian's leadership, bringing a fresh perspective and demonstrated expertise in areas where Marcus has struggled. I nearly choked on my water. Are you suggesting I would have a leadership role at Meridian post-acquisition? More than a role, Ms. Rodriguez. The board is considering a succession plan, with you positioned to replace Marcus as CEO within 18 months of the acquisition. The revelation stunned me into silence. They wanted me to replace my own brother? Marcus doesn't know about this discussion, Reinhardt added. And it would need to remain confidential until the appropriate time. But I wanted you to understand the full context of our interest in Neuromatch. Why me? I managed to ask. There must be more experienced executives you could recruit. We've watched how you transformed Meridian's internal culture in weeks. We've seen your strategic vision with Neuromatch. And frankly, having the Rodriguez name continue at the helm would reassure clients and investors during a transition. My mind was racing. I need time to process this. Of course, he nodded. But I hope this conversation addresses some of your concerns about the acquisition. The board is serious about Neuromatch, and about you. I left the lunch feeling disoriented. The acquisition offer had just become infinitely more complicated. It wasn't just about selling our company, it was potentially about me stepping into Marcus's role, taking the position he'd worked his entire career to achieve. The irony was almost too much to bear. From being called worthless by my brother to being courted to replace him? It seemed like poetic justice, but it also felt wrong somehow. Underhanded. Disloyal. But loyalty to whom? To Marcus, who had dismissed me and my vision so cruelly? Or to myself, my team, and the company we'd built? I didn't tell Eliza about Reinhardt's revelation immediately. I needed to sort through my own feelings first, to determine what I truly wanted, separate from the complicated emotions the offer stirred. That evening, I found myself driving to my grandmother's house in Tacoma. I hadn't visited her in months, consumed by Neuromatch's growth and the work with Meridian. But if anyone could help me see clearly through this tangle, it was her. Grandma Rosa had raised 5 children, run her own small business, and navigated life as a widow for 20 years. With unflappable grace. At 82, her mind remained sharp as ever, her advice anchored in wisdom rather than emotion. She welcomed me with a warm embrace and the smell of fresh-baked conchas, leading me to her sunroom where plants thrived in organized chaos. "Something's troubling you," she observed as she poured us tea. It wasn't a question. I told her everything: the original meeting with Marcus, his dismissal of Neuromatch, our subsequent growth, the work with Meridian, and now the acquisition offer with its hidden agenda. She listened without interrupting, her weathered hands cupped around her teacup, her eyes attentive. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Your brother called your dream worthless," she finally said. "That was cruel, and it came from his fear, not from truth. But now you face a choice that will define you more than his words ever could." "What do you mean?" "You can take this offer, replace your brother, prove your worth in the way the world measures such things, with power, with position, with revenge." She set down her cup. "Or you can define success on your own terms, build something truly yours, and let your work speak for itself." "It's not that simple," I argued. "The acquisition would give Neuromatch resources we can't access otherwise. We could scale faster, help more companies." "Perhaps," she nodded. "But at what cost to your vision? To your integrity? To your relationship with your brother, which, despite everything, still matters to you, or you wouldn't be sitting here so troubled." He sighed. "I don't know what to do." "Yes, you do," she said with gentle certainty. "Your heart knows. The question is whether you'll listen to it or to the voices that measure worth in dollars and titles." She reached across the table and took my hand. "When I started my shop, everyone said I would fail. Your grandfather's brother offered to buy it from me 6 months in, not because he believed in it, but because he thought I couldn't succeed on my own. The money was tempting. Life as a young mother wasn't easy. But I refused." "Why?" I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. "Because some things are worth more than money. The joy of building something true to your vision. The dignity of standing on your own. The knowledge that your success belongs fully to you." I left my grandmother's house that night with her words echoing in my mind. She hadn't told me what to do, that wasn't her way. But she had reminded me to look beyond the immediate temptation of vindication to the longer arc of my life and career. The next morning, I told Eliza about my conversation with Reinhardt. Her reaction surprised me. "They want you to Brutus your own brother," she exclaimed. "That's cold, even for corporate politics." "It complicates everything," I agreed. "If we move forward with the acquisition knowing this is their plan, we'd be complicit in Marcus's ousting," she finished my thought. "That's not why we built Neuromatch." Her instinctive rejection of the hidden agenda clarified something for me. Whatever legitimate business reasons might exist for the acquisition, this undercurrent of corporate betrayal tainted the entire proposition. "We need more information before making any decision," I said. "Specifically, we need to understand what's happening with Meridian's financials that makes the board so eager to change leadership." Eliza nodded, her expression turning thoughtful. "You know, we still have admin access to their communication analytics platform from our implementation. We could run some additional pattern analyses focusing on financial discussions among their executive team. Would that be ethical? I questioned. We're not reading specific messages, she clarified. Just analyzing communication patterns, frequency, sentiment, word clusters, around financial topics. It's anonymized data that they granted us access to for our work. After some consideration, I agreed. We weren't hacking or accessing confidential documents, just using our own platform's capabilities to look for concerning patterns that might inform our decision. The results were troubling. Communication around quarterly financials showed classic deception patterns: increased message deletion, reduced written documentation, circumvented formal channels. These patterns spiked around the European expansion and had continued at elevated levels since. This doesn't prove wrongdoing, Eliza cautioned. But it raises red flags about financial transparency internally. Enough red flags that we need absolute clarity before considering any acquisition, I concluded. We formalized our response to Meridian. We would not proceed with acquisition talks until we received complete financial disclosures and technical documentation. As an alternative, we proposed a strategic partnership that would allow both companies to benefit from collaboration while maintaining independence. Marcus requested a meeting to discuss our response. This time, he suggested neutral territory, a private room at the Columbia Tower Club overlooking the city. When I arrived, he was already there, standing at the window, Seattle spread out below him. He turned at the sound of the door, his expression unreadable. "Thank you for coming," he said formally. "Of course," I replied, taking a seat at the small conference table. He remained standing. "I've reviewed your counterproposal with the board. They're disappointed with the direction the discussions have taken. We're being appropriately cautious," I repeated my earlier position. "An acquisition is a significant step for both companies. The board believes your requests for financial disclosure go beyond standard due diligence. They're concerned about your motivations." I met his gaze directly. "Our motivations are transparent, Marcus. We want to understand Meridian's true financial position before making any commitment." Something flickered in his eyes, awareness, perhaps, that I suspected more than I was saying. "What exactly are you looking for in those financials, Camila?" "Consistency. Accuracy. Evidence that Meridian's reported growth aligns with its operational reality." I paused. "Particularly in Europe." He flinched almost imperceptibly. Then, surprisingly, he sat down across from me, his posture deflating slightly. "You've noticed the discrepancies." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I remembered from childhood. "It's more complicated than it appears." "Then explain it to me," I challenged. "As a potential business partner, I deserve that much." He was quiet for a long moment, weighing his options. Then, "We overstated our European growth for the past 3 quarters." The admission hung in the air between us. Even though I'd suspected as much, hearing him confirm it was shocking. "Why?" I asked simply. "The initial expansion failed, completely. But we'd raised capital specifically for European growth, made promises to investors, staked our reputation on international expansion. Admitting failure wasn't an option. So you lied in your financial reporting," I stated flatly. "We reported projected growth as achieved growth," he corrected, though the distinction was meaningless. "The plan was to catch up to those projections by the end of the year. And has that happened?" He shook his head slightly. "The gap has only widened. Each quarter, we've had to report increasingly optimistic futures to cover increasingly problematic presents. The implications were enormous. This wasn't just misleading investors, it potentially constituted securities fraud for a publicly traded company." "Does the board know?" I asked. "Some members do. Others suspect but don't want to know officially." He met my eyes. "Now you understand why they're so interested in acquiring Neuromatch. Your technology works. Your team delivers results. You represent legitimacy and actual value creation, things Meridian desperately needs right now. And you?" I pressed. "What do you want from this acquisition?" He hesitated, then spoke with unexpected candor. "A way out that doesn't end with my reputation destroyed. If Meridian acquires Neuromatch and you eventually take over leadership, the narrative becomes about planned succession rather than failure." The pieces finally clicked into place. "The board suggested I replace you as CEO." Surprise flickered across his face, quickly replaced by understanding. "Reinhardt approached you." I nodded. "And now you know everything," he said quietly. "The question is, what will you do with that knowledge?" It was a pivotal moment. I could use this information to negotiate a more advantageous acquisition, positioning myself to take over Meridian. I could walk away entirely, leaving Marcus to face the consequences of his actions. Or I could choose another path entirely. I'm not interested in taking your job, Marcus, I said finally. And I'm not interested in profiting from Meridian's misrepresentation to its investors. Relief and confusion battled in his expression. Then what do you want? The truth made public, I stated firmly. A full disclosure to investors, regulators, and employees about Meridian's actual position. A transparent recovery plan. And a legitimate partnership between our companies based on real value, not desperation and deception. That would destroy everything I've built, he protested. No, I countered. The deception is already destroying what you've built. The truth might save some part of it, and your integrity. He stood abruptly, turning back to the window. You don't understand. What you're asking? The board would never agree. Investors would sue. My career would be over. Then those are the consequences of the choices you've made, I said, standing as well. I'm sorry, Marcus, but Neuromatch won't be part of a cover-up. I gathered my things and headed for the door, my decision made. As my hand touched the handle, his voice stopped me. What if there was another way? I turned back. What do you mean? A way that serves both truth and recovery. Not a cover-up, but not immediate self-destruction either. I waited, skeptical but willing to listen. What if, he continued, you didn't acquire Meridian, but instead, I helped you acquire the valuable parts of it? The legitimate technology, the skilled teams, the clients who aren't part of the misrepresentation? How would that even work? A structured spin-off, he explained, his mind clearly racing. We create a new entity with Meridian's viable assets. You acquire that entity. The original Meridian discloses its true position and takes the necessary hits, but the technology and people worth saving become part of Neuromatch. It was a creative solution, but fraught with potential complications. The board would never approve that. Some would, he argued. The ones who care about the technology and people more than their own reputations. And I have enough voting shares to influence the decision. I considered the proposal carefully. It wasn't perfect, but it offered a path that aligned more closely with my values than either walking away entirely or becoming complicit in ongoing deception. I'll need to discuss this with my team, I said finally. And we'd need extensive legal review to ensure everything is done properly and ethically. Of course, he nodded quickly. Take whatever time you need. Just, don't close the door on this possibility yet. As I left the meeting, my mind was churning with implications and questions. Marcus's proposal was unexpected, a creative attempt to salvage something positive from a situation of his own making. But was it truly viable? And more importantly, was it the right thing to do? The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of confidential meetings with lawyers, financial analysts, and our core team. We vetted Marcus's proposal from every angle, identifying risks, ethical considerations, and potential structures that might work. Throughout this process, I maintained a deliberate distance from Marcus himself. This had to be a business decision based on facts and principles, not on our complicated family dynamics or his persuasive desperation. Finally, we arrived at a modified version of his proposal. Neuromatch would acquire Meridian's European division and select technology assets at fair market value. Meridian would simultaneously issue corrected financial statements and a recovery plan for its core business. Marcus would step down as CEO but remain as an advisor during transition. It wasn't a rescue operation for Marcus personally, but it did salvage valuable technologies and protect innocent employees from the full consequences of leadership's mistakes. When I presented our counterproposal to Marcus, he studied it silently. For a long time. This isn't what I hoped for, he admitted finally. But it's fair. More than fair, given the circumstances. It's the only option we're comfortable with, I said firmly. He nodded slowly. I'll present it to the board tomorrow. Some will fight it, but I think enough will see the wisdom in it. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. the following day. I expected to hear from Marcus by early afternoon. When 3 p.m. came and went with no word, I began to worry. At 4:30, my phone finally rang, but it wasn't Marcus. It was Jacob Reinhardt. Ms. Rodriguez, he began, his tone tense, there have been developments at Meridian today that you should be aware of. What kind of developments? Your brother attempted to circumvent the board. He approached our largest investor directly with a plan to take the company private, using financial projections we know to be fabricated. My stomach dropped. Why would he do that? To avoid the disclosure requirements in your proposal. We believe. Unfortunately for him, the investor came directly to the board with concerns. What happens now? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. The board has removed Marcus as CEO, effective immediately. We've also initiated an internal investigation into the financial reporting irregularities. He paused. Your proposal regarding the acquisition of specific assets is now being considered under new circumstances. After the call ended, I sat motionless at my desk, trying to process what had happened. Marcus had betrayed not just the board and his investors, but our tentative agreement as well. He'd chosen deception over accountability one final time. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Need to see you. Now. It's important. Followed by an address in Pioneer Square. I debated ignoring it. What could he possibly say that would matter now? But something, curiosity, residual family loyalty, or perhaps just the desire for closure, compelled me to go. The address led to an upscale bar in a historic building. Marcus sat alone in a corner booth, a half-empty whiskey in front of him. He looked up as I approached, his face haggard, his eyes hollow. "You came," he said, sounding genuinely surprised. "Reinhardt called me," I replied, sliding into the seat across from him. "What were you thinking, Marcus?" He stared into his drink. That I could fix it. That there was still a way to save what I built without losing everything. By doubling down on deception? By buying time, he corrected, though the distinction hardly mattered now. The private equity group would have given us runway to correct course without public disclosure. At the expense of new investors being misled. I pointed out. It wasn't a solution, it was just shifting the problem. He didn't argue the point. It doesn't matter now. The board has already voted. I'm out. Meridian will issue a statement tomorrow about leadership changes and financial reassessment. I'm sorry it ended this way, I said, and despite everything, I meant it. He looked up, studying my face. Are you? Part of me thinks this is exactly the karma I deserve after how I treated you. This isn't about karma, Marcus. It's about choices and consequences. Either way, you win, he said with a bitter laugh. Neuromatch will probably get those assets at fire sale prices now. You'll expand overnight while I become the cautionary tale at business schools. That's not what I wanted, I insisted. What did you want, Camila? When you walked into my office that first day with your idea? When you agreed to help Meridian? When you discovered what we'd done? The question gave me pause. What had I wanted through all of this? Validation? Success? Revenge? I wanted to build something valuable, I said finally. Something that helped people work better together. And I wanted to be recognized for my capabilities, not dismissed because of your preconceptions. He nodded slowly. Well, you've achieved both. Meanwhile, I've lost everything. Not everything, I corrected. You've lost your position, your company, probably some money. But you still have your skills, your experience, your knowledge. No one will hire me after this, he said bleakly. Maybe not as a CEO right away. But there are other paths. He looked at me skeptically. Such as learning from this experience. Building something new with greater integrity. Finding value beyond title and status. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he asked, "Would you hire me?" The question caught me off guard. What? Not as CEO. Not even in leadership. But as an advisor, a consultant. Someone who understands enterprise sales and scaling security products. I stared at him, trying to gauge if he was serious. Marcus, you just attempted to deceive investors today. Why would I trust you in any capacity at Neuromatch? He flinched at the directness but didn't back down. Because I know more about enterprise security than anyone you could hire. Because I've learned lessons the hard way that could benefit your company. And because I have nowhere else to go. The raw desperation in his voice was startling. This was Marcus, always confident, always in control, reduced to pleading for a chance. I can't make that decision unilaterally, I said finally. Neuromatch isn't just me. It's Eliza and our whole team. I understand, he nodded. But will you at least consider it? Talk to your team? I hesitated, torn between compassion and caution. I'll think about it. That's all I can promise right now. He accepted this with a nod, his shoulders slumping slightly. As I stood to leave, he looked up one last time. Camila, he said quietly. I was wrong about you. About your idea. About everything. You're not worthless. You never were. I was just too arrogant to see your value. The admission, coming now after everything that had transpired, felt both vindicating and somehow beside the point. My worth had never actually depended on his assessment, I just needed to realize that for myself. Thank you for saying that, I replied. But the truth is, I don't need your validation anymore, Marcus. I know my worth. And now, so does everyone else. As I walked out of the bar into the fading Seattle light, I felt a profound sense of closure. The journey that had begun with that crushing dismissal in Marcus's office had come full circle. Not with revenge or triumph or even acquisition, but with something more meaningful, the quiet confidence of standing firmly in my own value, regardless of anyone else's opinion. What happened in the weeks that followed would reshape both our companies and our relationship in ways neither of us could have predicted. But that story, the story of rebuilding, redemption, and unexpected partnership, was just beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.